Welcome to Upside, where we look behind the headlines that affect European venture. Today, it is Lomax, Mads, and my good self, and we're talking about the latest on AI models. We've got a bit of a dig into infra spend, which has been taking the shine off stocks. SaaSpocalypse, if you don't know what that is, you will in a minute. The US-EU uncoupling, are we quitting the US? Going to take a look at that. Spain's moves on social, the Spanish PM is not happy. And Muskonomics, can space data centers really work? Oh, and we've got a bit of a gloves off between Anthropic and OpenAI. I thought that was kind of cool. Gentlemen, how are you? Madzadoodle, you've just come back from the Far East again. How are you feeling? Fresh? Fruity?
Fabulous.
Re-energized?
Absolutely. No, it's a great show.
Dude, and Max, what's happening with you? What's the latest?
I've been here this week. We had our big announce rounds, which actually I'm going to shout out a deal of the week at the end of the show.
I saw you all over LinkedIn saying wonderful things. It is time to talk your own book. I think that's super cool. About time we had more of our own stuff on this. I think that's lovely.
100%.
So, today, I think it's probably one of my favorite agendas for our calls today. This week has been really big on news. I've got to say, not much that actively feeds back to Europe. We have been a little bit naughty on the time, but we will. There is still enough, obviously, here that's going to affect Europe and European venture, but it is still quite US-centric. But some really interesting stories. And to kick off, Mads, your happy place. So lots of AI model activity. I think if you blinked this week, you'll have missed 3 new model releases, 2 flagships launched 20 minutes apart, and then there's some open source juice. What's going on here?
Well, as you said, I mean, it seems like we're going to start in the same place we're going to end potentially, which is going to be Anthropic OpenAI feud that just heated up to hitherto unseen levels this week. There's sort of the stuff that happened in the gallery, and then there's the stuff that happened on the main stage. And to start with the main stage stuff, as you said yesterday, we had the 2 flagship models released 20 minutes apart. Anthropic released their new Opus 4.6, which, as you'll recall from last year, potentially when 4.5 was released in Q4, it really just blew everybody away as the most incredible thing the world of technology and AI has ever seen. It was the model that converted even some of the holdovers, the naysayers of, no, we're always going to be doing handcrafted coding and we're going to check the code, to basically just resignation. There's no point coding manually anymore. Opus will handle it. Anthropic will handle it. It was just that good.
Well, Darius is big on that, wasn't he? Darius said WF was basically going, most of my coders don't code anymore. They just use the tools.
Exactly. And so many people came out. I mean, you had Andrej Karpathy, kind of one of the original founders of OpenAI, former head of AI at Tesla, coming out and saying, look, it is so good that if I only knew everything I could do with it, I could be 10 times as good as I am. For the first time, there was this feeling that we've been given, godlike powers in our hands, and now the only thing holding us back is really our ability to use the tools. Well, those tools just got an upgrade. And so Opus 4.6 was released yesterday. All the angels were rejoicing. Kind of the whole world of technology was ecstatic. Because, of course, what's been happening is, OpenAI, captured the world of AI and our imagination 3 years ago with the release of ChatGPT. And Anthropic then came from the back, kind of OpenAI renegade, setting up the competitor, and actually overtook OpenAI in the interim in terms of the enterprise, in terms of coding. And so they released that model yesterday. But OpenAI, within 20 minutes, hit back with a formidable model, GPT 5.3. And so what's really interesting is the way the 2 models stack up, because the Anthropic model has had incredible advances in reasoning, in knowledge work. It could do new cool things like update PowerPoints and kind of as your, office, coworker assistant. It's really, really hard to beat. But in on the home turf, what's now become the home turf of coding, there is actually the benchmarks are saying that OpenAI now has pipped Anthropic to release what what they're saying is the best model according to the benchmarks. And so this is interesting because Anthropic, of course, now are the incumbent. They're defending the enterprise territory. They're defending the coding territory. And it's going to be really interesting to see, does this mean that OpenAI is going to start taking back some share? And to answer that question, you're going to ask, what's more important, to have the better model or to have the better sort of tooling that sits on top? Because, Anthropic released Claude Code a year ago, and that is really that tool that's taken the world by storm, and that one of the reasons why so many of us use Anthropic's tools so much. Well, OpenAI, they released their Codex tool to try and compete, and the question is the fact that OpenAI now seem to have a better model when it comes to sort of pure coding benchmarks. Will that mean that developers will start switching back to OpenAI and back to the Codex model, or is the fact that people have become so comfortable now with Anthropic's coding tools, Claude Code, does that mean that the platform is sticky? Now, I'd say I personally invested a long time, months in developing workflows and automations and skills for my Claude Code setup. And so it's going to take quite a bit, I think, to flick me over to another paradigm. Now you could say under the covers, you can actually hook up some of the tooling with different models on the back end. And so there's a lot of interesting things that are going to play out here on the chessboard. It's really cool.
This isn't a switch, is it? This is not like your search. You're using ChatGPT as search rather than Google. This is actually your workflow. I think that's a very interesting point. You can't just rip and replace when you've built workflow in a particular toolkit. So maybe this is going to be a little bit more tricksy. I'm surprised that they're going toe to toe. It feels like we're now at this kind of diverging point where, with ads in ChatGPT, it feels like OpenAI can go in a very particular direction and Anthropic can go in another direction. So it feels odd that they're going toe to toe for the coding, for the engineering side. Is that fair?
Well, don't forget, we don't know if the ads will work yet. I mean, I think you've always said, look, as soon as the ads are switched on, the users will switch off and go somewhere else. And that's possibly true. I think we just don't know. We don't know whether it will be a Google-like experience where people have ads and it's sort of fine and we don't mind too much, or whether it will be, or we feel that's intrusive. And then we'll come back to intrusion and betrayal and all those good things later in the show. I know you've lined up some good stuff for us. Just a couple more things I wanted to share on the new model releases. So, what OpenAI have said is that the GPT 5.3 is the first model that helped build itself. So they say debugged its own training pipeline. It set up a lot of the own flows that could create the model. So this is really kind of this recursive improvement that we've always been talking about in the lead up to AGI. Another thing that's cool is Anthropic. Of course, they've been focusing a lot on model alignment and safety. And they were quick out to say yesterday, their red team, their security team said, we have found more than 500 bugs, kind of serious security issues in open source libraries that we found and developed patches for, or not we, but Opus 4.6, the new model. And so the notion of open source was always, look, the whole world can see the code with enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow. And that means that, the whole world can see the bugs. And so coders, somebody will discover the bugs, but Anthropic is saying that their bots do it better. So that was sort of interesting.
Well, that's why they're divorced, isn't that? Was why Darius and Sameh divorced in the first place, with security, safety, alignment. I don't know where that leads into, bug finding per se, but it just feels like that's kind of aligned with part of the reason that Anthropic was set up in the first place.
It's always been Anthropic's assertion that they have the most aligned model. Alignment meaning aligned with what the users want, aligned with the kind of human values, as opposed to just doing something else.
Yeah.
There's just as a quick aside on the models. I mean, we've had some really cool stuff coming out of China as well. We saw the Kimi K2.5 come out last week. It's performing extremely well. It's close to Opus 4.5, so last quarter's Anthropic model, but at a fraction of the cost. We've seen the Qwen3 Max model come out from Alibaba, and actually the benchmarks are saying that's not behind on reasoning at all. Actually, the argument is that's possibly ahead of the Frontier Labs models on reasoning. Again, it's an open source model. So this has just been a formidable few weeks on the AI front.
How much have they borrowed, do we know, the Chinese open source? There are obviously threads showing that there is a little bit of borrowing going on from the foundationals, from the key people. What's going on there?
Yeah, and of course people will say that. I mean, what's the saying from your old industry? Good artists, they borrow, and what is it about great artists
steal?
Yeah. And so I think the truth is everybody's learning from everybody, but you cannot overtake by copying. And what we are seeing is genuine innovation from the Chinese teams. I mean, we saw the Kimi K2.5 model having these new swarm capabilities. There is a swarm capability built into the new Anthropic models. And with that, I mean the ability for the models to, sort of split out and coordinate the work of many models at once. So you sort of, really get a multitude of the performance capability. I mean, there's an argument to say that the Chinese are ahead on the swarming capabilities right now. So it's not just copying. There's certainly unique innovation.
And also it layers down to context then. It's like, what are you using these models for? Do you need these premium top of the range? Because is it fair to say that 4.6 isn't as exciting as 4.5?
Yes, as a step change, I'd say it doesn't feel as big yet. There is a kind of, and it's really just released less than 24 hours ago. So the community is still working out exactly where the hard points and the weak spots are, etc. One of the assertions made by Anthropic is it'll be better at doing agentic things autonomously for longer. And what does that mean? That the whole issue we have with models is context rot, and it is that they drift. So I set them off to do something, and initially when their context is clean and the instructions are clear, they're really good. But over time, they'll start to lose the direction. And so they can't go for weeks and weeks and weeks. They're going to be reined in. And memory has to be wiped and they have to start afresh, almost. And there's an argument here that's being made that, look, this model will go for longer, better than previous models. But we're still so fresh into this. We don't really know yet. I don't know if we've had enough time to use it for that long.
Yeah. I'm still very bullish on the open source. I think that's going to be a really interesting. I think the Chinese
massive game changer.
They're doing it so well as well. But I was like, whatever you do, we'll just throw this brick into the sidelines. I love it. Next up, we've got Alphabet's mega spend. So Alphabet is now expected to spend 180 billion in 26 on data centers, and obviously all the accoutrements. That's more than 3 times the size of VC in Europe. It's massive. However, they beat earnings, announced this big spend, happy. Stock price dropped 5% on the news of the CapEx. Obviously, investors getting very itchy that they're spending so much. Sundar positioning this spend as the infrastructure foundation for the next decade of computing, as he would. Obviously, he's going to put out the PR. It feels like Google is now moving from a software business to an infrastructure or a utility business. CapEx is at a whole new level. This feels like a big deal. The market says that it's a big deal. Lomax, can you fill in some of the gaps?
No, I think it is a big deal. Just when you thought that the CapEx couldn't kind of get any bigger, it just continues to get bigger, right? So the numbers are quite staggering, as you pointed out, and nearly 200 billion planned this year, up from, I think, 90 last year. It just kind of continues across all of the hyperscalers. As you rightly say, Alphabet now, the cloud business is pumping, right? So I think that's a really interesting development.
They beat all earnings, didn't they? So if I remember, all earnings were fine. It was just the spend that wigged the market out.
Yeah, the future spend, exactly. But cloud is up 48% in Q4, which is much more than, I think, AWS is 20%, Microsoft or Azure was 39%. So the Google cloud business is growing a lot more quickly than its peers, up to 17.7 billion in Q4. So I think that is becoming a bit of a big part of the business. Now, the business is still printing money. I mean, it's basically spending all of the money that it prints on CapEx. And I think they're basically and some. The mantra really is, the risk of underinvesting is greater than the risk of overinvesting, right? So it just kind of continues.
I think one of the questions, we discussed yesterday, is this really a thing that Sundar's gone out with this CapEx announcement? And I think it is, as Lomax said. It's sort of an anti-bubble signal, right? Everybody's been talking about, is there an AI bubble? Are we over-investing? And Sundar, who is one of the smartest operators in the world, he's basically told Wall Street, listen, you ain't seen nothing yet. We said last year that this was going to be big. No, it's going to be even bigger than anybody thought. We are a capacity constrained. I mean, it's the same stuff that's come out of OpenAI. We could grow faster if we had more GPUs. So they're filling their boots. They're putting in as much capacity as possible. And if you think of the size of this thing, so Google alone in 2026 is going to spend as much on CapEx as 4 times the entire European venture capital ecosystem. I just let that sink in, right? We talk about R&D and where the dollar's going. Of course, some of this is not pure R&D. Some of this is, I'm just literally going to buy data centers and I'm going to buy GPUs. But if you think about what sits behind this, a lot of stuff, kind of where Google is special, is they have a lot of in-house capabilities. They're very vertically integrated. A lot of this will funnel back into their own TPU dev shop. They're going to buy their own hardware. That's R&D for them to develop next generation GPU capabilities. I think it's really, really exciting. I mean, we've been saying for, I think, at least a year or more that Google is in a unique position in the industry. And I actually think this is a really, really exciting announcement and that he's going all in this way.
I think it's crazy.
We saw last week, right? We saw last week from the orders that ASML put out, right, in their earnings, that, the order
100%.
books, like this isn't, the spend is not showing any signs of slowing down.
Every time somebody says, look, I think we're in a bubble, and you ask them, so how much are you using AI? The answer typically is all the effing time. We're all using it all the time.
Yeah. I think
Right?
OpenAI now has nearly 1 billion weekly users. They have
Yeah, the
900
Gemini's AI app has like 750 to 800 million.
It's
users
grown
now.
really fast. Many people have started switching from ChatGPT to Gemini. Gemini is cooking, no doubt.
Yeah. And that's like one in 8. That's a lot of
But
people.
it does, but just go back to, if you have this, what do we think total CapEx is here, guys? Potentially $1 trillion, right, across all of these hyperscalers. Think of the free cash flow that needs to be generated to justify that, right? That's a lot of revenue that would drop down to gross profit to free cash flow. Like, that's a lot. And, look at the revenue of these organizations now, 20 bill at OpenAI, soon to be 20 bill at Anthropic, Google, a bit harder to separate out. But, those numbers are a lot smaller than what will be needed to, be the gross revenue to pay back this CapEx, right? Maybe I'm thinking about things in the wrong way, but I mean...
No, you're not. And I think there's no doubt that eventually this will monetize in some way, because we're all using the tech all the time, right? There's going to be a way to make money. But how long will it take? And the big thing, back to our opening discussion, the big question nobody has an answer to is how quickly, or if at all, OpenAI will be able to make app monetization work. Today, they're monetizing less than 5% of their users. With ads, that could become 95 to 100.
And it's costing them a fortune, isn't it? It's costing them a fortune to service. I mean, I don't know how much it costs per chat GPT request, but I mean, they're paying for it, not us.
Let's try and unpack that, because we have very specific data from Google on that. Sundar, he said that over the last year alone, the cost to service a query has come down by 76%. The models are just becoming so much better.
But
what does it matter? If you can decrease by 76%, you're going to asymptote to a very low number. You're going to make money on it.
But you are still effectively paying users at the moment to use your service. And I know that there's land grab, there's learning.
Today, OpenAI is not charging 95% of their users. Google on the Gemini side is at least that, if not a higher number. You're absolutely right. People aren't paying. That's why the ads are so important. If you can start monetizing 100%, that changes everything.
It's important to OpenAI. It's not so important to Google, or Alphabet, I would argue, because they have distribution.
Well, so where do the ad dollars come from? Ad dollars come from businesses that are trying to acquire customers. If I'm a business trying to acquire customers, I'm going to think about how much do I want to spend to acquire those customers. Today, I'm spending most of that money with Meta and Google. If OpenAI becomes a viable alternative, where the dollar's going to come from? Well, there's an argument to say that the whole market is just going to grow, but there's another market that says that, look, if OpenAI starts to yield really good conversion on ads, that will start to siphon dollars away from Meta and Google. So I do think it does matter to Google in it's kind of second order or third order derivative sense.
Yeah, there are only so many eyeballs on the internet doing things. Sure, it's growing, but there are only 8-9 billion people here, and I don't know how many on the line. I'd assume more than half. But okay, that's super interesting, and it leads very comfortably onto the SaaSpocalypse. So, if you haven't seen this week, we saw a global stock market sell-off. The click ragers naming it SaaSpocalypse. Nearly 300 billion wiped off global software stocks. So the fear here is that seat-based SaaS licensing and its moved to a consumption model is going to make traditional SaaS businesses pretty tricky to run. So if humans are contracting in white collar roles and agents don't need that SaaS access because they are effectively the SaaS function, then how can these SaaS businesses survive at the margins that they have? Is the broadest of brushes, and I'm going to ask you to embellish on that. Now, Sundar and Jensen's retort is that the robot won't reinvent the hammer, but instead use tools that are available. So the AI agents will use the SaaS and not replace it, which I think is a slightly bullshit argument. I think it's a really bad analogy. I can't see, unless you're in very regulated spaces or secure tech, why you're not going to allow some version of agents to do that function for you. But Mads, can you unpack this a bit better for us?
So many delightful things to dig into here. I mean, if you could have steelman the why is this the end argument, and we talked about it just 2 weeks ago, right? Is SaaS dead? One of the big triggers of the SaaSpocalypse and all the kind of billions, hundreds of billions that were wiped out stocks over the last few days is the whole world got their hands on, or at least were given the opportunity to get their hands on the agentic power of Claude Code when Anthropic released Claude Cowork a few weeks ago. So back to our opening conversation, when you work with agentic tools like this, you build prompts, you build context, you build skills. And when I say skills, I don't mean the human skill. I mean, you are developing skills for the tool. And these skills are, well, we used to call it prompt engineering back in the day, but it's a lot more than just, typing in a few lines of a prompt and then hoping for a good answer. It can be hundreds of lines of very detailed prompting or context you provide to the model to get specific outputs. Let's remember, what is a model? It's a compression of all the world's human knowledge into one, blob that you're then trying to activate. And so you know everything, model. Now, how can I activate that and get you to use all that knowledge to analyze a problem for me, create some content for me, do something meaningful for me? And that's where the prompts, that's where the contexts are helping. And so Anthropic, they released a number of prompts or a number of sort of context blobs for Claude Cowork, including one in legal work. And it wasn't a massive thing. It was sort of 2,500 lines of prompt that was released on GitHub. You can go there and see what it is. But it turned out that was really, really good at legal work because they've kind of codified a lot of the work that you do in the legal world when you compare documents and you analyze contracts, etc. And the models are exceptional at that. They're language experts. And so people got really scared and they said, listen, if you can this simply prompt one of these models, an Anthropic model or an OpenAI model, to deliver such powerful legal analysis, why do we need all these tools? And so a lot of companies got hammered on the back of this. RELX, they had the worst day since 1988, down 14%. Thomson Reuters down 16%. LegalZoom down 20%. They're absolutely hammered. And a lot of these are European businesses, actually, sort of not sort of classical software companies, but more like data publishers that were seen as very vulnerable because of all these new tools we have. The steelman argument is we got the AI models, they're there. And the only thing now we need to work out is how to use them to make all these traditional software platforms redundant. And it's much, much easier than people think. That's the steelman argument for why this is the end of SaaS. I've got the other side as well, because the truth is, look, the cloud has been around for 20 years. Well, we're still running on-prem software. It's not gone away. And you know what? Today, we are still using mainframes. Right? It's a 60-year-old technology that still processes a lot of banking transactions, a lot of travel reservations. Behind all the things we see, there's probably a mainframe somewhere tucking away. Now, IBM has gone from being the world's most valuable company to more of a utility when it comes to mainframes. And that's probably the real threat. Maybe not so much that the companies all blow up, but that they retrade from kind of where they are today at maybe 40 times earnings down to 12 times earnings, which is more like a utility. And of course, that will lead to a lot of value compression. So that's what's got everybody scared.
What I was going to say before is I'd love to be in Peter Steinberger's inbox, because I'm sure OpenClaw was another reminder to the market as to the function that's now available. And I bet he's being courted by plenty of very powerful people in our spheres. Lomax, anything you'd add to this? Anything
No, I mean,
on your mind?
I know we're not called downside, but it's a shame that, when these things happen, the drawdown is like particularly hit. This is the first time we've talked about Europe for this pod, and I think it's about the drawdown in a lot of these data publishers. Look, I think this is an overcorrection as often happens in the market, right? Clearly, this is a long-term trend that SaaS is going to be eaten and whittled away, right, by agentic workflows, etc. But this is an overcorrection, I think. Like, as Mads points out, like, this doesn't take in the slowness to adoptive enterprise, right? There are still people, within these organizations who are taking the more risk-averse decisions. And also, it's very, very complicated to roll out AI and agentic workflows and processes across these organizations, right? So I think while the trend is there, this is definitely an overcorrection, I'd say.
But Relics, Thomson Reuters, LegalZoom, they're not exactly they're the worst hit. They're not exactly the
over the long term, yeah, those business models are
leading
in trouble.
drivers in the industry. Yeah.
No, but those business models are in trouble for sure.
We've seen a big correction in the people that probably needed a bit of a slap. Is that fair?
Yeah, and don't just put it this way: like, no general counsel in a Fortune 500 company is going to be sacking all of their lawyers and just replacing them with agents overnight, right? There's still going to be, a lot of lawyers internally who are still using LexisNexis and all these other products that they need and have used today. So it will be much more gradual than the markets have taken into account this week.
There was a nice quip from Vembu from Zoho, which is another SaaS company. He said an industry that spends vastly more on sales and marketing than on engineering was always vulnerable, and I think that's fair.
That's true.
Yeah, I think that's got to be the line, isn't it? At least the basic line. Let's talk about the EU-US great uncoupling. I might be overcooking it a bit here. A number of stories, anecdotes, thoughts this week about Europe weaning itself off US big tech. So we've got Amundi, the $2.4 trillion asset manager, cutting its exposure to the US, France cutting off Zoom. It did remind me years back when China just switched off all of the American services. I remember Zuckerberg being over in Beijing, and I remember Musk trying to court and get Tesla on the inside. And then China just switched up all the American services and allowed local services to spring up. Now, I know that we can't do that, but there is an argument for some version of rocket internet style. We know how these things work. We know what they do. We know what services we need. So what is happening on this great uncoupling front? Is it am I really overcooking it? Is there anything reality here? Lomax, where should we start on this one?
Well, we could probably start with the news in France that they're banning 2.5 million civil servants from using Zoom, Teams, and WebEx, and they are forcibly migrating them to this homegrown state-backed platform called Visio, and that they are insisting.
Visio,
exactly. Which I think was the name of like some a Microsoft product back then.
It is a Microsoft product, yeah.
That I think has been mothballed. So anyway.
Watch for the legal proceedings, then we'll see.
So this is, they've said, everyone, you've got to be using this by 2027. This was developed by DINUM, the Direction Interministérielle du Numérique, which is the French government's internal
posh.
Tech squad,
loving the accent, darling.
Digital affairs. The breaking point, and this is something we've discussed a little bit before here around sovereignty of tech platforms, but I think the breaking point here was a recent incident involving the International Criminal Court, not Donald Trump's favorite organization, when the US issued sanctions against one or two of the judges, I think, and Microsoft reportedly cut off their email access. So this was the straw that broke the camel's back. I mean, look, I don't even know why we're taking this sort of, do we really think that a French state developed software product is going to displace widely what the best of the US, the American, global tech can produce? I don't think so. Don't forget, this is not the first time in the context of France they tried to do this with cloud, and they had two competing cloud providers in the late noughties, 2009, 2010, which both kind of petered out. This is happening. It's not just France. In Schleswig-Holstein in Germany, they migrated 40,000 state workers from Microsoft to open source alternative for their inboxes, and also the Austrian army have done this as well. So I think this is a sovereignty push by the governments in Europe. I think it's going to be a lot harder for them to do this by mandating and creating their own products. I just, unfortunately, as a free market libertarian, or certainly if you believe in the ability of the free market to create the best products for the best users, etc., then this is not the way to go.
One counter to that, Lomax, is that technology, I mean, this isn't the noughties. Technology is so functionally smart, capable, ubiquitous. It's a bit of a step change. AI obviously layered on top of that, but it's a bit of a step change technically, don't you think?
No, so I think it makes it easier now if you are this Dinam or whatever it is in France to actually create, a new Zoom. It makes it a lot easier now than it was 10 years ago, right? Yeah. So that is for sure. But again, like I tend to be more of the in the camp of, you let the market create the best products. If you want to create national champions, there are other ways to do that, which is to create great environments for entrepreneurs who are, able to raise money, not weighed down by a bunch of red tape, can raise growth capital, can ideally win contracts with you, the French state, as an early user. So I don't know. That's the kind of model that I prefer, rather than being like, we're going to fork this piece of code internally in the French government. We're going to kind of put some, our own system, our own skin on it, and this will be what everyone's got to use. I just don't think that's the way to go.
I 100% agree. We have incredible founders in Europe, and we got to why did we need to, why have we needed to chase some of them away, right? We founder of Revolut, we've chased off to the Gulf. You've got, company, things like Telegram. Telegram could be an alternative to WhatsApp. Like, there's so much we could do. When it comes to technology and governments, it feels like a missed opportunity. So Linux was invented in Europe. There's no good reason why European governments don't use it more. That feels like lazy procurement. It's an incredible software today. You could use it to run operating systems. You could use it, open source alternatives to the Microsoft suite. So I think there's some good things in the market you could do today, and then you need to support founders instead of sort of trying to do, concrete, kind of heavy-handed government built things.
I think Saul Klein said this in a FT article when asked about this. It feels like we're fighting yesterday's battles.
Oh, always.
You know what I mean?
Always. One thing it's important to remember is that the European Union exports 500 billion euros of stuff to the US every year. Yeah. And obviously we'd like to keep selling those things. That's quite important for our economy. So yeah, it feels like we need to tread carefully and not too heavy-handed.
I was chatting to Gemini about this, and it came up with it feels like a kind of digital version of the Maginot Line. As in like, it looks great in theory. It looks amazing, but ends up being totally fucking useless when it really needed. So
yeah, I saw Pedro Sanchez getting serious about social media and misinformation, disinformation, hate.
Well, he's now been called Dirty Sanchez by Elon Musk.
Elon wade straight in, obviously. I don't know where he finds the time to have all these pissing matches, but I really enjoyed watching a world leader. I got that same warmth when I was watching Mark Carney as when I was watching Pedro Sanchez, basically saying that he's going to hold CEOs accountable and you can't hide behind these tech platforms anymore. And he's making hate speech and other forms of mis and disinformation online a criminal offense. Now, it does then, and obviously, also he's removing the ability for under 16s to use social media. So under stuff that we've spoken about before. But it does then raise the challenge and the question of how are you going to prosecute? Where are the free speech lines? And how is the state going to control? And that's really super problematic.
It's a very interesting one. I would say an observation is that, and actually it's quite a smart one by the European leaders, is they turn this into a public health issue rather than a free speech issue. So before it was like, we want to control what's being said on the platforms, which there's always going to be debate around that. And the Americans say, well, you're expressing free speech. And then the Europeans say, no, this is hate speech. But actually now by saying, look, this is actually, I think Macron said, this is damaging the brains of our youth, right? Literally came out and said that. In the context of social media and children, it's like, well, actually, this is being treated as a public health issue, takes it out of the ambit of that debate on free speech. And I think it's a very smart thing for them to do. And this is one area where I've said before that I do agree with them. Even in principle, I know it's going to be hard to implement these things. But everyone in
Thomas, you're
Europe now
not
is
worried
moving
it's a
to this.
slippery slope to censorship?
No.
I'm just thinking back to COVID, how so many things couldn't be said and how much censorship there was at the time, under the guise that this is, for the purpose of public health.
Yeah. No, I guess I'm an optimist and I always see the good in people, and I don't think that's right. But you're right. I suppose that is a risk. Yeah. But I think when you're trying to, I mean, maybe we're kind of conflating two separate issues here, which is the general kind of free speech debate and in the context of under 16s, like preventing them from accessing social media, right? I don't know. I don't think that's a slippery slope.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. I think we were sort of talking about, what are you allowed to say online and what shouldn't you be,
Of course,
be
yeah.
allowed
Well,
to
yeah.
say. I
Well,
think that's different. I mean,
yeah.
we also there are also other things we don't let children do, right?
Should Donald
it's too
Trump be
dangerous.
able to call, Pedro Sanchez dirty Sanchez? Of course he should, if he wants, like,
But that's not really hate speech, but there are. I
well,
mean, there are
true, but
obviously-
it's offensive. It's offensive to some people, but yes.
Yeah, but I mean, offense is a choice, isn't it? I mean,
Now
this is
you're getting into the debate, but yeah. Okay.
yeah. Maybe we can't, but we'll see. We'll see who they prosecute and for what. So we will soon, hopefully, see some of the canaries as first in the coal mine as far as legal recourse goes. So I guess we'll see what he does.
Well, and also don't tip, the French authorities have been raiding the offices of X this week. That's coming, there's now processes being kicked off in the UK. So the regulators are now really going against X in the context of this, pornography kind of line of
so they should.
thread.
Well, I just wonder how much they're trying to use that as a wedge. And this is what worries me, is that this becomes about much more, because of course, X have been doing things they should not do that are inexcusable. But there are also a lot of debates about, what should you be allowed to say? And I do feel when it comes to kind of freedom of speech, I think that's a very important principle.
But
for
what would you
us.
do if you were the UK government, Mads? What would you do about Grok? Unpleasant image creation and unpleasant messages disseminated via Grok. What would you do?
Can we not find them?
I guess that's where it'll end, but you need the evidence, right? So listen, who knows what's going on as part of a criminal process.
Is that all it's about? Is it just about gathering evidence for that fine? I mean, they're now merging with SpaceX. I think you can find up to 10% of global turnover. I mean, it's going to be a pretty meaningful number.
And then watch it stuck in the courts for the next 10 years as everything just gets bogged down until people get bored or run out of money.
Well, a lot of the fines that were made, I don't know if you remember, there were kind of all the issues with companies escaping to Ireland and not paying tax there. And the money eventually was clawed back, and it was tens of billions.
Was it?
Yeah.
I always wonder what happens at the end of these fines. It always looks like it just becomes noise and then nothing. I always wonder where they settle.
Listen, I think, Musk, he is exhibit A in the discussion around the, corruption of power, because, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And it's not so much about greed. It's more about unaccountability that corrodes clarity and clarity of thinking. I think in many ways, he is still mission driven. I think a lot of the things he does things because he believes them, as opposed to caring about whether he has another billion in his bank account. I think he stopped caring about that a long time ago. So I think the world needs mission-driven entrepreneurs, but they also need people to be accountable to the law. And the question for me is, can Europe become a place that welcome the best entrepreneurs and hold them accountable? I think all this talk about criminal liability and putting people in jail and all these raids, I think is a bit of a slippery slope. I think it's dangerous. Maybe it's the right thing to do. I don't know, but I think we should be really, really sensitive to it. Kind of the heavy-handedness of politicians jailing people because they don't like them, or because they don't like what they say, or because they feel they're a threat to power. I think that's very, very tricky.
But fines can't be the way when you've got more money than God. I mean, almost to the point of it being a rounding error to them. Why would he care?
Well, I mean, look, if the number is big enough, eventually people will care.
I think you have to hit them where the ego lives. They can't operate in this territory. There's some form or version of control. I can't see a fine being the answer. But we'll see. In fact, thank you so much for the beautiful segue into Muskonomics, because this has to be my favorite topic this week. I've been looking at data centers in space and trying to understand more of this $1.5 trillion combined merge. And I can't make any of it make sense. The physics, the maths, the payload logistics, the science in space. I cannot see how any of this story makes any kind of sense. So, Mads, set this one up because I really want to dig more into this.
But I mean, I think you're exactly right, Dan. I mean, it's exactly tied to what we just spoke about. The success breeds hubris. He's one of the most impressive entrepreneurs of our generation.
And
He's built SpaceX, Tesla.
hubris precedes nemesis, no?
Well, there you go, right? Icarus flying too close to the sun, which might literally be what's happening here. But I think his track record in that sense is not in question. He's done incredible things, but it's just that success has led to a hubris that's eroding clarity, and it seems clear that XAI just can't catch up from a commercial perspective with the Anthropics and OpenAIs of this world.
They're trying hard though, Mads, aren't they? They're spending $1 billion a month to try.
They're spending the money, but they don't have the revenue, and so they've got to find it somewhere. And so he is merging one company he controls into another company he controls, setting his own price. No board, no checks, and it's wrong in so many ways. And I think it's a shame.
It's a tough gig. Go on, Max, go.
No, and it's being wrapped up in this kind of broader Muskian narrative of, data centers in space. Like all of this is interconnected, like space, AI, compute, data centers. We're going to run out of space.
I can buy the full stack. When I first looked at it, I thought, no, I can absolutely buy this kind of full stack method, this thinking around that. That makes complete sense. But then when you look at the detail, it makes no sense.
The irony here also is that don't forget about a year ago that there was basically a plan to demerge Starlink out of SpaceX to actually, unbundle these organizations, right? Because remember that Starlink is the kind of cash cow within, the launch business at SpaceX is clearly a very valuable business because it does, 70, 80% of launches globally, but it doesn't make as much money. Whereas Starlink is printing money.
Let's remember where some of this has come from. So, you go back a couple of years, there were huge discussions about alignment in AI is one thing, but having AI that's politically correct is another thing, right? Having Google's Gemini show that, I don't know, George Washington was black and, Nazis were Native American women. It was just diversity, just craziness. And I think Musk having more of a free speech bend and sort of say, listen, we've got these AI models that are, we have all this stuff that's built in and they're not truth seeking. They are something else seeking that certainly is anything but the truth. So I think the mission to try and create an AI that is maximally truth seeking, I think is good. But I think the problem is he's gambled on trying to make it into a commercial endeavor. He's managed to raise some money. He's brought investors along with him, but he has failed to scale it because he's not focused enough on commercialization. And therefore, he's doing the easy thing, which is actually taking cash from another company that he controls but doesn't wholly own. And from a corporate governance perspective, it's wrong in so many ways.
Because basically SpaceX is finally profitable, right? It's doing like 1 to 2 billion, I think, a year, right, in profit. Obviously, XAI is burning $1 billion a month, so it's not. It'll cover only a small bit of that, but it'll cover a bit of it. The revenue on XAI is negligible,
but
right?
SpaceX is one of the hottest private companies on the planet. Everybody wants to buy secondaries. It looks like they're going to go public. They're going to be able to tap public markets. And of course, that's the thinking. We have a limitless ATM here.
It's very interesting also that I love the data center and space narrative because, the guy Philip Johnston, who's the founder of StarCloud, which is this YC startup, that did its first test a couple of months ago. That's basically a seed stage company a year ago that has been a big exponent of data centers in space. He's English, by the way, which I think is really cool, even though the company's in Redmond in the US, but it's actually a British founder, which is, good to see. But actually, he's been amazing. If you follow him on socials at beating the drum on this narrative, that only really started to pick up in Q3 last year. And then Musk has kind of been, beating that drum since then. And now it's kind of convenient to tie the AI story into the whole space story, no?
How does he talk about latency and payload delivery and cooling and just some of the basic physics about running data centers in space. And you listen to Elon, he'll say, oh, it's okay. The chips, they do bit flips. There is some error correction where everything so far has been on the older chipsets where they're a little bit more resilient. And you look at 50% of anything that goes up into space fails. And you go, it's okay, it only needs to last 3 to 5 years and you can recycle it. But that's fine. If you're looking to push 1 million units up into space, that's like 10 launches a day. And that's ignoring the fact that just the solar panels required, just the energy required. Look at the ISS. It's got like football field sized solar arrays to collect the amount of energy that's required. It's like none of this makes sense from the cooling, from the energy, from the payload.
But I'm going to go against you. I'm going to go against you on this one, or I don't know where you were going, but say, look, if anyone is going to figure this out,
sorry, I was just word salad.
If anyone's going to figure that out, it's Musk.
No, but it goes against, and also Lomax, he's saying
no. If anyone's going to figure it out, it'll be Musk.
This is going to be profitable within 3 years. He's saying,
come on, yeah, of course. But he does that the whole time. But Musk, he now has the full stack. He has, because if this guy Philip at StarCloud or any of the space companies I've invested in, right? It's very hard for us, when you're building a space company, a component company, or something that needs to prove something that it could do something in space, you have to book your flights, 8 to 9 months in advance, right? And you can do one test flight, maybe 2 a year, depends on how much money you have, right? So for startups doing new things, they can maybe put something in space once a year, show that if it doesn't work, then you've lost 18 months of runway in a startup, basically, with a failed experiment, right? With Musk, he could be launching the whole time, running experiments at mass scale with, as Mads pointed out, the huge capital weight of the public markets behind it. I honestly think he'll figure this out. So that's the bear case for it, for sure.
I think we are a decade away, even at Musk.
Sorry,
even
did
at
I
Musk
say bear
velocity.
case? I meant bull
Bull.
case. Sorry.
No, I heard you.
Bull.
I heard bull. Don't worry. But I just can't see how any of those points can be easily.
No, they're all massive points.
Decades of R&D to get this kit to work in space. Even at his rate of knots, there is no way that you can counter all of the failure, all of the weak points that are going to make data centers in space viable. It just feels like a PR story on steroids that makes no sense to me. But we'll see. Never bet against the man, right? That's what you're saying, Lomax. Never.
Well,
never
and also
bet
just there's a need. There's a massive if you could sort out the problems the cooling, the latency,
cooling, payloads, energy. I'm not I'm not a space engineer. What the hell do I know? But it just even a base looks very, very tricky.
Yeah, but imagine if actually you sorted it out. Could you imagine? Just look at the Europeans trying to build data centers now next to school playgrounds, or there's no space, and then people won't let it. It takes years for these things
Weak argument. Weak argument. I don't. I mean, especially. I mean, look what Alphabet's doing.
But Dan, if you follow the money, it makes sense, doesn't it?
Go on.
So Musk wants to build XAI. He wants to have the world's best AI. He has, like everybody else, seen that AI is the most important technology of our lifetime.
Yeah.
The only way for him to keep funding it is to find cash somewhere. And he's got Tesla is struggling, right? They have their own things to sort out. X is the best way to get that limitless ATM he needs. And so what argument does he need to create a kind of a reasonable business case that you can merge two companies without too many shareholder lawsuits? Well, there's got to be an argument. That's data centers in space. That's it. The data centers in space don't have to be real in the next 3 years. All he needs is the argument that they could be.
Yeah, and then we're back in bubble territory.
Oh, 100%. But don't forget what he did with Tesla. It was also a question of, well, just have faith, right? Like with SpaceX. Have faith,
For
have
sure.
faith, have faith.
But he delivered cars. SpaceX delivered payloads to the ISS, rescuing astronauts from X and Y. So there was a proportion that worked. My thesis here is that data centers in space cannot work at core. They're great PR, raise the money, sure, go public. I get it. Everyone's going to buy into Muskonomics. but there's there's not even a core version of reality. There's not even a car on the road to then stretch the truths around FSD. You haven't got
Details,
wheels on the
Dan. Details.
You're in the wrong industry, man. Going.
And listen, I know I've got to think bigger and not be such a cynical old fart, but this is just one step on the crazy train too far for me.
I was having a chat with one of, I probably can't disclose too much, but a startup that we backed that's working on propulsion in space. The stuff that we talked about yesterday would blow your mind about what is possible and what is going to happen in the new space economy, right? And it's stuff that I came away from the call like bamboozled, but also just like, yeah, actually this could happen and I can see why. And you put enough smart people on the case and you put enough capital behind it, it will happen. So
good. Let's put some money on the table. What do you reckon? He says 3 years. His exact
no, I think it's
quote
more.
was
I don't know.
30 months to profitability from data centers in space. I'll take that bet every day of the week that it is not going to happen. Anyone up for that? I'll take that.
I'd give him maybe 5 or 6 years. But it's still going to happen, Dan.
All right. We will see.
Did you see the news this week that the Russians have been patrolling around space with 2 nefarious satellites? No,
tampering.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it seems to be quite easy to take satellites out. And maybe that's part of the reason why he wants so many up there. Maybe just makes it a little bit of a numbers game. But it does feel like it's relatively easy with lasers to take satellites out. So I don't know. Who knows? We are going to see space lasers after all. Reagan was right, baby.
Yeah, they've been lurking. Actually, one of them I think has just fragmented and blown up. So that's a good sign. So that's one down.
That's par for the course for the Russian stuff. Last up, but not least, but a little bit of a funny, not funny, was the Anthropic Super Bowl ads. Did you see them? I thought they were kind of cool. So they're basically poking fun at ChatGPT for ads, going back to our top of the show points. And then Sam A coming on X and going, great, funny, but then having a bit of a dig and getting quite acidic. And it was quite unusual, I thought, to see the CEO of a company actually front it. So Anthropic going, I can't believe that you're putting ads in AI. We are never going to put ads in AI, which is also an interesting stick in the sand for Anthropic to take. But are the gloves off? Is it why are they going for each other? Why bother doing this? Anyone got any thoughts on this?
I think the team over at Anthropic thought it was too good an opportunity to pass up on. They obviously have a spring in their step. 2025 was a formidable year for them. Let's not forget, they started last year at what seems like around $1 billion in annual recurring revenue and ended close to 10. I've just never seen anything like that before. Right? You come out of the year like that, you feel you can walk on water. And then, for sure, somebody has said exactly, Dan, as you've done many times, well, aren't users just going to leave when the ads are switched on? And we know OpenAI, they've been playing around with the idea of putting ads on for a long time. They hired people out of Google's ad team. Are they coming? Are they not? And they told us recently they're coming. The ads are coming. And we know they have to because they got to monetize all those users that aren't paying today. And I think they just felt it was too good an opportunity to pass up on.
Yeah, and I guess actually thinking about it and listening to you, Mads, it kind of makes sense because what they're basically saying to the market is ChatGPT took the brand. Everybody, when they talk about LLMs or AI, immediately think about ChatGPT because they were first out of the gate. So they're now trying to, and obviously Anthropic then focused on the engineering and the coding and more of the enterprise and the back office. And now they're trying to go, look, no, we are back in the race. We are in the game. Here we are. It could backfire, but maybe it's an interesting brand play. Maybe. Just on that basis.
Listen, there's no bad PR, right? I, as you know, I'm a huge Anthropic fanboy, but I actually didn't find them that funny. I thought they were a bit
they're base.
Yeah, just a bit. Yeah, exactly.
I thought they were hilarious. I thought that the dating one when he's talking about advice or speaking to his mum, and then come and meet golden oldies and get him a date. I thought that was like a little bit spicy and a bit funny. I thought it was quite funny.
Hey, listen, the difference between you and me, if I was the CEO, I wouldn't have greenlit it, but maybe they'll get away with it.
Anything else before we close off? Deals of the week.
Yeah, I think we should just talk about this critical minerals thing, no?
Do it.
So we had a reality check this week released by the European Court of Auditors. Must be a fun Christmas party there. But a reality check on the EU's Critical Raw Materials Act, which was passed in 2024, which set a goal that no more than 65% of any strategic mineral should come from a single country by 2030. And the new report basically says the EU is set to fail that target across the board. I mean, we currently get, EU currently gets 97% of its magnesium from China, and China still controls 70 to 74% of the 6 rare earths needed for permanent magnets. So, way off. And then there's this amazing deposit found in Kiruna in Sweden, a rare earth find, but the report notes it takes 10 to 20 years to actually start mining in Europe due to red tape.
But this is the problem, is it, Lomax? It's just an inertia problem. Rare earths aren't actually that rare, from what I've read and from what I can gather. It's just the mining and the processing, which we've outsourced our dirty processing to China because they don't mind polluting their rivers and lakes. But we need to find it and then mine and process. But it's just that period of inertia. We don't have the infrastructure to do it. That seems to be the problem.
Well, we don't have the infrastructure to process it at the moment, but all of this stuff could be built, but to permit it and find a place to do it is very, very hard.
And that's 15 years, right? I mean, whichever way we cut it, that's decades away.
It's a long way away. And actually, interestingly, just on rare earths, is there was Rubio and Vance hosted a rare earth summit in the US, in Washington, DC this week. Yeah.
Really?
Which is basically, the theme of the summit was, how do we, the rest of the world, apart from China, like wean ourselves off China, right? So it was like, putting some investment into certain African countries. And the Europeans were really trying to cozy up to the Americans here to try and come up with a kind of pact, an agreement. It's funny, all these things tie in together. We talk about the French coming up with their own, sovereign tech, Mads, the 500 billion of goods that we send over there. Like all of this is interlinked.
Yes.
And, there's only so much we can like rattle the saber and be like, oh, you can't have access to our market for this, or we're going to shut down and use open source for our emails, and
globalization works, right?
Yeah, the under 16s can't use your social media platforms to look at your adverts, that kind of thing. But it is all intertwined, and then we need to go to them to be like, what are we going to do about rare earths?
The great uncoupling can't uncouple, and there will be another shuffle for all these minerals and components that we need to build these bloody chips and this infrastructure and data centers and energy and sovereign control. Because we all need the rare basic components to do all this stuff. Oh my goodness, that's it. I'm moving to Mars. Lomax, you've got to do your deal of the week, because this.
You've got to do deal of the week because
drum rolls.
Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I am now talking my own book, and this is my deal. So I met a young Portuguese founder in his 20s called Pedro in early 2024. He was working on a problem that I knew about, which is clinical trials are incredibly expensive, right? So the cost of drugs, the cost to get a drug to market is anything from 2 to 3 billion now. And a large part of that component is because clinical trials are getting more expensive and more difficult to run. So he is basically taking LLMs to try and solve that problem and make clinical trial planning much more streamlined, quicker, and save a bunch of costs from avoiding protocol amendments during the trial, right? And he's had unbelievable traction. So we committed early in 24. Seed round was done, mid-late 24. Big rollout last year commercially. Sales grew very fast and raised the second biggest Series A in Iberian history, $52.5 million Series A, which is a pretty big Series A for Europe. I think it's top 5 by quantum for last year in European Series A. So that company is on a tear. And well done, Pedro. And he's doing something very important, which is cool.
And I mean, we're already, a year and a half in, so nice.
Yeah, no, I mean, exactly. It's very exciting.
Well done, Pedro. Well done, Lomax. I wanted to just raise 5 European unicorns. So Aikido, Cast AI, Harmattan, Sapiens, and Preply, which is Ukrainian edtech. So I just wanted to highlight, in January alone, we saw 5 European unicorns. And not deal of the week, but I just wanted to give them a shout out.
I think
thought that was
cool.
That's
good. And Aikido is a hell of a company, because Aikido is basically, they've gone from standing start to Series B in a couple of years, just rolling out in the US now.
I think
impressive.
It's just important to highlight that. Mads, anything on your mind before we close off?
Yeah, we often talk about how there is too little capital at the growth stages in Europe to fund some of these big, successes when they scale up. And so great news that there's a new 1 billion euro fund that's launched here in Europe. It's not Caramba, it's Kambara. And so the idea is to deploy kind of checks exactly at the size you're talking about, Lomax, kind of the 30, 40, 50 million euros into great companies. It's a team coming out of firms like Mundi, Atomico, and Promus, and other kind of European institutions that have come together to create this new business. And they have announced they've already raised 750 million euros. So congratulations to them.
I carumba, not carumba. Well done to you. Boys and girls, pleasure and a gift. We'll catch you next week.
See you in the
Goodbye.
next one. Bye.